I know what you're thinking. What could this old lady possibly teach me? Probably nothing, and that's okay. But I've been on this earth for 79 years, and there's something I've learned about people who say probably nothing. They're exactly the ones who most need to hear what comes next. My name is Margaret. Everyone calls me Maggie. I was born in 1946 in a small town in Tennessee where the biggest cultural event of the year was the county fair. My mother sewed clothes for other people. My father worked in a mine until the mine stopped working with him. I never went to college, not because I couldn't, but because in my house the question was never, "What college are you going to?" The question was, "When do you start working?" I started at 16, in a textile factory, 12 hours on my feet. The noise from the machines was so constant that after a while you stopped hearing it. It was like the whole world had turned into a hum, and me, in the middle of all that noise, I cried. Not out of sadness. I cried when I saw a co-worker have a birthday and nobody said anything. I cried when the foreman yelled at a new girl who didn't understand the instructions. I cried when someone brought flowers from their garden and set them on top of the machine. They told me I was too sensitive, that it was a problem, that in the real world there's no room for feeling that much. It took me 60 years to realize they were completely wrong. In 1962, when I was 16, the word sensitive wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. My supervisor at the factory was named Dorothy, a big, serious woman with the strongest hands I've ever seen. One day she called me into her office, which was really just a little room with a chair and a 1959 calendar on the wall. And she told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "Maggie, you're a good worker. You're fast, you're neat, you're never late. But you've got a big problem. You feel too much. And in this life, people who feel too much end up getting hurt. Learn to turn that off." Learn to turn that off. I was 16, and I believed her. I spent the next 20 years of my life trying to turn that off, trying not to notice when someone was sad, trying not to get emotional at funerals, trying not to get too happy at weddings so I wouldn't seem over the top, trying basically to feel less. You know what happens when you try to turn off the part of you that feels? It's not just that part that shuts down. Everything shuts down. At 26, I married a good man named Robert, Bobby, a quiet man, not many words, who could fix just about anything with his hands. We loved each other, but I was so busy being strong that I never told him what I felt. I never said, "I got scared today," or "I missed my mother today," or "I need you to hold me for no reason." Strong people don't say those things. I was strong. Bobby died in 1980, a road accident, 42 years old. I was 34 with 3 kids, 6, 8, and 10. And at the funeral, I didn't cry, because I'd spent 20 years learning not to. People told me, "You're so brave, Maggie, so strong." And I nodded. And inside, something was breaking silently without anyone seeing it, not even me. That's what the world does when it tells you you're too sensitive. It doesn't help you protect yourself. It teaches you to abandon yourself. After Bobby died, I survived. That's all I can say about the next 10 years. I survived. I stayed at the factory. I even got promoted, became a supervisor. I learned to speak the language of people who don't feel. Efficiency, production, numbers. I got good at that language. So good, I almost forgot I had another one. My kids grew up. I raised them on my own. They never lacked food or a roof over their heads. But now, when I talk to them, and I have 3 grown children with grandchildren of their own, they all tell me the same thing. All 3 of them, independently. They say, "Mom, when we were kids, we never knew how you felt." It's not a complaint. They say it with love, but it still hurts. Because I thought I was protecting them. I thought if I was the unshakable pillar, they'd feel safe. That if I didn't show fear, they wouldn't feel fear. That if I didn't cry, they'd learn that pain is something you get through in silence. What they actually learned is that feelings are dangerous, that vulnerability is weakness, that asking for help is shameful. It took them years to unlearn that. Years of therapy, hard conversations, grown adults having to learn from scratch what no one taught them as children. All because one day I believed a woman with a 1959 calendar on her wall who told me feeling too much was a problem. There's something I want you to understand, especially the younger ones watching, especially if anyone has ever told you you're too much of something, too sensitive, too intense, too serious, too cheerful, too weird. Too much is almost never about you. It's about someone else's discomfort. When someone cries easily, people who don't know how to cry feel exposed. When someone cares deeply, people who've never cared feel called out. When someone feels intensely, those who shut that part of themselves down decades ago see everything they lost. And instead of looking inward, they point outward. You're too sensitive. No, they're too numb. And you remind them there's another way to live. I have a garden, about an acre behind this house. I started it when I was 55, after I retired from the factory. I didn't know anything about gardening, not a thing. I bought a book, asked neighbors for advice, killed half a dozen plants before anything really started to grow. And in that garden, something happened I didn't expect. I started to feel again. Not all at once, little by little. Like when your foot falls asleep and then starts waking up, and the first thing you feel is that uncomfortable tingling. That's how it began. I noticed I'd cry when a plant I'd cared for months finally bloomed. I'd get anxious if frost was coming and I hadn't covered the tomatoes. I'd feel genuinely happy, not relieved, not satisfied, but happy when a neighbor came by and I gave them carrots I grew myself. And I thought, Maggie, you've gone 25 years without feeling this. Where have you been? The garden gave me something back I thought I'd lost forever. And it did it the only way important things ever come back. Slowly, quietly, through something completely ordinary. Now I'm 79 and I cry at my grandchildren's weddings. I cry when I see birds on the branch of the walnut tree I planted 12 years ago. I cry when my oldest son calls me on Sundays just to talk, for no special reason. I cry when someone tells me they're hurting and I can see exactly how they feel, because I felt it too and kept it inside for too long. People see me cry and sometimes ask if I'm okay. I always tell them the same thing. I'm better than I've ever been. Because crying isn't a sign something is wrong. Crying is a sign something matters. And if nothing makes you cry anymore, that's what should worry you. There's a big lie people are told, especially women from my generation. Though I see now men are told it too, just in different ways. The lie is this. that strength is the opposite of sensitivity. That if you're sensitive, you're weak. And if you're strong, you don't feel. It's the complete opposite. The strongest people I've ever known were people who felt deeply. My mother, who worked her whole life sewing clothes for others and never complained, cried every time she saw a beautiful sunrise. Not because she was weak, but because she had the ability to be fully present in a moment and let it move her. A neighbor of mine named Earl, 91 years old, a war veteran, a man who's seen things I couldn't begin to imagine, cries when he talks about the friends who didn't come back. He cries without shame, sitting on his porch, staring into the distance. Then he wipes his face and asks if you want some lemonade. That's not weakness. That's what it looks like to have integrated your pain instead of burying it. Burying pain is easy, at first. But buried pain doesn't disappear. It ferments. It turns into bitterness, into distance, into that feeling that life gets grayer as the years go by and you don't quite know why. I know exactly why. Because I made space for everything bad and no space for anything good. And when you stop feeling the bad things, you inevitably stop feeling the good ones too. Real strength isn't not feeling. Real strength is feeling everything and moving forward anyway. It's crying at the funeral and getting up the next day to make breakfast. It's being afraid and making the hard phone call anyway. It's knowing something will hurt and choosing it anyway because it matters. That's strength, not a stone face and a shut-down heart. When I was 68, my youngest daughter, her name is Carol, she's a doctor, asked me something I wasn't expecting. We were sitting in this same room drinking coffee, and she looked at me and said, "Mom, have you ever talked to someone? Like, professionally, a therapist?" And I told her what I'd said my whole life. "Oh, Carol, that's for people with real problems. I'm fine." And she said something that left me speechless. She said, "Mom, you've been telling me you're fine for 40 years, but I've never seen you truly happy." 40 years telling my daughter I was fine. And she, who knows me better than anyone, who's seen me in the good times and the bad, had never seen me truly happy. I went to therapy the next year, at 69. My therapist was in her 30s. Her name was Diana. At first I felt ridiculous, an old woman telling her story to a young girl. I thought, what could she possibly teach me that I haven't already lived? Everything. She taught me everything. Not because she had more life experience than I did, but because she knew how to ask questions I'd never asked myself. She asked me, "What did you need as a child that you didn't receive?" And I opened my mouth to say I'd never lacked anything, because that's what I always said. But instead, I started crying. It took me 3 sessions to answer that question. The answer was, I needed someone to tell me my feelings were valid, that feeling deeply wasn't a flaw, that the little girl crying in the factory over flowers on a machine wasn't broken. She was alive. No one told me that until I was 69 years old. And what I learned in those sessions, and I'm still learning because I still go once a month, is that it's never too late to get to know yourself. Never too late to understand why you are the way you are. Never too late to give your heart what you denied it for decades. I'm 79 years old. I grow tomatoes, peppers, spearmint, and 2 varieties of roses a neighbor gave me who's no longer with us. I talk to my children every Sunday. I have 7 grandchildren who know their grandma cries during animated movies, and that's perfectly okay. I don't have any great legacy. I didn't invent anything. I didn't run a company. I didn't change the world. But I did do one thing that feels more and more difficult and more necessary. I learned, late, but I learned not to be ashamed of feeling. If there's one thing I want you to take from this conversation, it's this. The next time someone tells you you're too much of something, too sensitive, too intense, too anything, before you believe them, ask yourself one thing. Are you too much, or are you simply being? Because there's a big difference between someone who feels deeply and someone who makes others uncomfortable because they stopped feeling a long time ago. Don't give up who you are just to make someone else more comfortable. I gave that up for 40 years, and the garden you see behind this house, that's what blooms when you stop giving yourself up. Take good care of yourself, and if you need to cry today, cry. It's the bravest thing you can do.